Thank you very much everyone for coming and welcome to our 4th out of 5 events that the Politics Society have hosted this year so far. This event is called Beyond Parliament, and the reason that we're having this discussion today, which I hope will turn into a debate, is because the Hansard Society are about as depressed and sad as they've ever been about our general propensity to vote at the next general election. It's looking like it's something like 41% of the public are going to turn out and vote, which, if you have also got our lovely Bournemouth Rock today, you'll note that the Winton by-election got 15% of the population out to vote. And that's quite sad, really. I think that's quite sad. I suppose one of the main questions is, why is that the case? Why aren't people coming out to vote? Is it, as Russell Brand says, that we're just apathetic, we're angry, we're sad, we think we can do something else, we're just disengaged? And if we're not going out there voting, does it mean that we're not being citizens? Now, there's a real selection of people on the panel today, and I hope what we're going to be able to show is that we are being citizenly in very different ways. So we've got representation from the business community, from the third sector, we've got some direct action and some protest. And we've also got the gentleman who's going to start us off today, Andy Thornton, the Chief Executive from the Citizenship Foundation. So we're going to start with maybe an idea of actually sort of what citizenship means and really actually why that's an ideal that we should be aiming for. And then we're going to have a bit of a look at the other ways that people are engaging and how they can get their voices heard. And then I want to open up for a bit of a debate. So as you're listening to what the contributions are today, maybe think about how you feel, what you would do if you went out and voted, why you would or wouldn't vote. And don't be afraid to express some strong views. If we can get a good debate going, so much the better. It makes for fantastic television. So each of our panellists is going to speak for about 5 to 10 minutes. So we're not going to take a break. We're going to rush straight through. And when there's a practical as well at the end. You'll speak to that last.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a practical at the end, which should be great fun. So we should be done. We should be done by 5:30 if people are needing to go. So without further ado, Andy?
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks. I'm delighted to be here. Our little organisation does a lot of work in schools trying to get young people to understand the value and purpose of politics in general. And also we've noticed recently in the trend in the 18 to 30 year age range, a real drop-off in belief, trust or interest in politics. So one of the reasons I wanted to come here today was to take through some of the thinking we've been having, and I've kind of put it into a speech rather than give you facts and figures of why, a bit of our analysis of why people are so turned off politics, and also an appeal to you, mostly to the younger ones. So if I start talking as if you're all 20 years old, it's because that's what I thought I was going to encounter. So for the purposes of this exercise, please be 20 years old. But it's 35 years since I was at university. And I thought if I came here I'd feel quite ancient, but when you get older you don't start to feel ancient, you just look it. And one thought I had about putting this talk together for today definitely made me feel it more than I actually feel as a person, which is that I grew up in an era where my parents' formative experience was the Second World War. Whereas you probably grown up in an era where your parents' formative experience was the 1970s. So my parents lived through the creation of the welfare state, the setting up of nationalised industries, and the kind of businesses that produce the goods that we now nearly always associate with multinational brands. But your parents lived through the Thatcher years. And in the Thatcher years, a lot of what my parents created was dismantled. And I'm not blaming your parents, by the way, because they are my generation. You can blame your parents for other things. What I want to do is track what's the story about that, and how is it that so many people have lost interest in politics, and how does it relate to that particular story? Because by the 1970s, when Margaret Thatcher came along, she had this realization that one reason so many voters get frustrated with the state is because it's got too much responsibility for too many elements of their lives. Nationalised industries that were put together after the war had a responsibility for many of the essentials of daily life. The electricity you use, the gas, the transport system, the cars you drive, the houses many lived in, the hospitals, the healthcare, the defence, the welfare support, all these were the responsibility of the recovering British state after the war. But as the years went on, if you didn't like the way things were in the country, your grudge tended to be therefore against the government. Now, Margaret Thatcher embarked on a huge project of selling much of it off In privatising it, she also got rid of the state's responsibility for delivering many of the essentials of life. This left the government dealing with a much smaller range of issues, and it also meant that businesses were going to start running many of the essentials, which was fine as far as she was concerned, because they'd be run more efficiently, because people were competing, they were doing it for financial reasons, and they would deliver better services in order to get the financial contract. Now, the added bonus of all that was that people would also have less to moan about when it came to government, because they were responsible for less. Now, the same principles continued in the years from the 70s till now, in that even when Tony Blair brought the end of that particular Tory era, he achieved it by changing the ideas behind how the wealth and common ownership are written into Labour's constitutions. You may be familiar, although you didn't see it, with a discussion about Clause 4 in the Labour constitution, which meant that instead of the government making sure wealth was distributed fairly amongst the people, its job was somehow to be the hinge between business and between the public sector, so that business could as fairly as possible somehow help the nation work. And Tony Blair seemed to believe that he could persuade business to do that, which is one of his many delusions about his persuasiveness, because he really didn't. But that's part of the ongoing story, because what we've seen over the years has been a slimming down of the responsibilities of government, which has become known as smaller government, in contrast to the bigger interventionist state that took part in controlling and supporting many elements of our lives. Now, that peak shifted recently in your lifetime, giving David Cameron the opportunity to coin a new phrase. And his new ingenious spin was called the Big Society. And I was there, and I was involved in that, and I was working with the government at the time when this new phrase came out. Now, the concept of the Big Society basically creates a division in our minds between government on the one hand and society on the other. That's the rulers and the ruled somehow. And by making it sound like of the gift of government to make us take more autonomous decisions for our own lives, he somehow trimmed down again in people's minds the role of government, the smaller government, which promises less. And if you promise less, you're probably more likely to deliver. And if you deliver, then you're probably more likely to get re-elected. This was the genius of the Big Society. And what he managed to do at the same time was return to the notion that government is a form of sovereign and the people are subject to the government. Now, that's in stark contrast to the post-war period. In that period, people saw government as the custodians of their livelihoods, supporting common well-being of the people. The government were the guardians and the trustees of our collective wealth, helping our long-term prosperity. They could become that because after that period of the war, we were a very different nation to the nation we are today. Our forebears were in the kind of throes of rebuilding a country after gargantuan losses that saw rich and poor pay the same price, the blood of their children. So we were unified, and we could tolerate the idea of being joint custodians of wealth and opportunities because we were a tight-knit country. Now, contrast that with where we are today. Now, recent Mori polls showed that the over 65 age range, in that age range, 80% of people consider the welfare state to be the greatest creation of this country, the greatest joint creation for the country. 4 out of 5. In your age range, if you're in the 20-25 age range, 1 out of 5 saw it as being one of our greatest creations. That's a big difference in the perception of the electorate about what the state does and about what we achieve together through the state. So basically the 70s generation saw the welfare state's achievements dismantled. The children have also inherited quite a low view of what the welfare state has brought to our country. And similarly, I think you've inherited a low view of politics in general. So that when the financial crisis came along, we watched politics look weaker and weaker. It seemed to be undermined by something we're powerless to change. What was that? It was the markets and the multinationals who were basically dominating the choices and the environment that we live in. And government has little control over these things. Rather, it kind of tweaks market forces as favourably as it can, whilst lowering taxes as much as it can, and whilst making sure it gets re-elected. But the upshot of that, I think, is to position government increasingly in a place of irrelevance. So when you look at the electorate today, you see the retired age range living with old ideologies, but young people like you with all the idealism that's common to youth, with very few political places to put it. So today's young people tend to be similarly idealistic, but bereft of ideologies that find a home in politics. So instead of believing and hoping in government, your generation appears to have a vague and kind of unplaceable sense of resentment that something that should be there is missing, which stokes up further disenchantment. So for all you might reach for single issue politics, you're left trying to persuade the same old guard to change their ways, the same people that drive you nuts. Now I think we've ended up, because of this, with what I would call a kind of inhumane Britain. It's run by economic choices where people are actually making money out of others' hardship. For instance, if you're unemployed in the next few years, you'll find yourself at some kind of job centre. You won't find a group of fellow citizens who are there to support you through that hardship. You'll encounter a profit-making company. And if you're debilitated, you'll discover that the managers of the company who are making a choice whether your health is good enough to get you a job are actually going to make more money if they judge you, even if you've got terminal cancer, fit for work, which does happen and has happened. You'll find someone who's been offered the chance of making money from your hardship. And through privatised companies running public services, we've sucked out the humanity by concluding that the only way anyone will ever do a good job in service of others is if they can make money out of it. And in my view, that's inhumane. So then, through slowly eroding the size of the state and through having a decreased expectation of government, we've also devalued the value of a vote. So who really cares about voting? What difference will it make? And I can't blame you for thinking it's not worth getting involved in politics, because politics doesn't seem to be worth the effort to many people. But we can't let that lie. We can't pretend there's an alternative, another option to politics. There's no other way to organise ourselves except through political means. There's no Russell Brand variety of realisable ideology that can somehow unite us over and above the pragmatics of politics. There's no mantra of love and respect or higher realisation. There's nothing that will magically override our differences. And I say that, I work quite often in Pakistan. I go about 3 or 4 times a year, and it's a country built on a high and valuable ideology and belief of Islam. But there's people killing themselves all over the country because of the sectarian divides. And it's virtually impossible to create something higher we can all aspire to. Even in creating it, we often create division. So here's my main point. We have to rebuild a humane politics, not a plastic party politics. And I say humane politics because people, this is a truism and very obvious, but it isn't when you see the way the political system takes us apart, because people are humans. Because citizens are humans. They're not economic units, they're humans. They're not constituents, they're humans. They're not industrialists, labourers, they're humans. They're not consumers, they're humans. They're not scroungers, they're humans. They're not humans in any other way except you and I are equal. And humans need humanity. And we need it in our politics, and we need it in our economics, and we need it in our legal system, and we need it in our community life. We need it in our civic lives that is built on our humanity. And this is what's not available to you as a young person right now in our politics. This is where our politics has slowly leaked out the value of being political. It's placed financial interests at the top of our political hierarchy, and we inflated the bubble of our financial interests, and we watched it burst in front of us. We're not economic autonomans, we are humans. So I think your generation needs to get political with a big P, with a kind of Westminster local government political, not just single issue political. Not political for a thirst for power, but political for a sense of each other. And you need to topple my generation's failures. You need to revile the greed that built a state on the excesses and desires that were prevalent in the 70s and 80s. You need to topple the one that's now maintained by the long-term competences of the elite classes, capable of perpetuating a society that favours the rich and ambitious while feathering the nest of old Etonians. That's the one we have to get rid of, and we have to put people at the top of the tree, and that's what your instincts are, I believe. And I think it's time for a humane version of Britain built by people like you who sense the richness of humanity because you're at the open horizon point of your life. You're young people who sense what it is to be human, sense the possibility of being you. And you are our best hope. So it's time for you to get political.
Thanks very much, Andy. Jonathan, it's Jonathan Waddington-Jones, who's the Chief Executive of Access Dorset. Are you going to start with the video for us?
Yeah. I'm going to bring it right back down to the local now again. Access Dorset is a local organisation that's run by and for disabled people. And I thought one of our key projects at the moment is around citizen journalism and giving disabled and older people a voice locally, which they don't feel they have. And I thought one of the easiest ways to explain it would be to just show a short video, which wasn't designed for this audience. It was a part of a funding pitch, so bear with it. But I think it's a fairly succinct way of explaining what we're doing.
Access Dorset is an organisation run by disabled people, older people and carers. We're partnered with 18 other groups in Dorset, giving us membership of over 5,000 people. Many of our members face physical, attitudinal and communicational barriers which leave them excluded from policy debates which affect them. In short, they're seldom heard and don't have a voice. To address this need, a group of our members looked at many different models that would give them access to peer support, information on independent living and a platform to communicate with the wider community. The answer was to launch a completely new digital service, a website providing a virtual centre for independent living and a citizen journalism project we call ADTV. Our concept is a contemporary online virtual high street with shops, buildings and signs that represent different aspects of independent living. The website uses the medium of short film storytelling to engage, entertain and challenge.
Recently went to the town hall back in the summer for my brother's wedding, found a lot of access issues which took away from the enjoyment of the day. ADTV made a film about my experience and sent off to the Chief Executive of Bournemouth Council. They've now used my video in their staff customer training, which is really, really positive.
The Office for Disability Issues was really keen to provide Access Dorset with seed funding to enable them to develop ADTV and prove the concept. We are really excited because we believe that this is a model which could be scaled up and replicated by other disabled people's organisations.
We at Bournemouth University are really excited to be working with Access Dorset to develop the first cohort of citizen journalists with a series of workshops empowering them with the confidence and skills to produce content, but also train further cohorts to aid capacity building within Access Dorset.
I'm founder of the Creative Co, who are partners of our digital community, a support programme to help the development of community and social enterprises using digital technologies. This year we were thrilled to invite Access Dorset to become one of our first cohort of pioneers and really explore the reality of what was involved in developing a viable digital asset.
We're just starting to see the power of our virtual Centre for Independent Living for delivering real peer support, raising awareness and driving change. We really need your support now to help us to develop the minimum viable product and to realise the full potential functionality of our digital innovation. We really want to take the project onto the next level now. Okay, so forgive that direct pitch for funding, but I thought that was a quick and easy way of describing our project. This project came about because our members are just thoroughly pissed off that they've not got a voice. They don't feel like they're heard. We're a small organisation. We've only got five staff, but we've got 19 partner organisations and a combined membership of over 5,000 disabled and older people locally. We're fed up with media representation, which would paint disabled people as either being returning war heroes or Paralympians, or on the other hand benefit scroungers and work-shy people, when we know the reality of disabled and older people's lives is for the most part neither of those. Disabled people are experiencing savage cuts to welfare benefits at the moment. and yet nobody's actually, we don't think it's clear the impact that that's having on individuals. So we're providing a platform for disabled and older people to tell their real stories, tell it how it really is and how it's affecting them. And that platform is about giving our members a voice and demonstrating active citizenship. People are involved. We have no problem at all drawing citizen journalists into our project. They're keen to get involved because it's real and it's about making a real difference locally. It's empowering of those individuals that get involved, and it will lead to tangible changes, we hope. Like everybody, I think a lot of disabled people are pretty dubious about the value of voting, because like many other people, they feel that you can't put a rizzle of paper between the different parties in terms of policy. The political paradigm that the share of austerity measures and welfare benefits cuts, it remains the same. So I think a lot of disabled people find it hard to engage with that, and also disabled people are facing everyday barriers, getting up, getting to work, getting transport, barriers within work, and now you're asking them to engage with politicians who speak a different language, whose language that they cannot connect with. And I think a lot of people are switched off of that. They're also fed up of local decision makers and policy makers developing services without their involvement that then don't meet their needs. And we see that across local authorities and healthcare. There are numerous examples of that. I'd also make the point that Lindsay, who you saw in the film, who had trouble getting into the Bournemouth Borough Council Town Hall for her brother's wedding, had to be lifted up by the wedding guests up the stairs because no one knew how to operate the lift, etc. Ruined her day. They've commissioned us to carry out an access audit off the back of that, which was due to start next week. They've now cancelled that because the lift's bust again and it would be too embarrassing for them. And if you were a wheelchair user elected councillor, you wouldn't be able to get into the chamber because it's inaccessible, which I think just about says it all. So that's our project, that's what we're trying to do. I don't think there's any doubt that citizens are active, but I think they really struggle to engage with big P party politics.
So I'd like to ask Mandy Payne to speak next. Mandy's the president of the Bournemouth Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. I thought I'd start with telling a little bit about what the Chamber of Commerce actually is and its role within Dorset, and then read you a few notes that I've written in readiness for today. Across Dorset, there's 16 independent town chambers of commerce. We do have a county chamber of commerce as well, which you might know as Dorset Business. Dorset Business is a commercial entity there to serve the many larger businesses across the county, really, which are more engineering and manufacturing based, and that's where they keep the control of things like the export licenses and such like. But across the county, all different towns such as Poole, Bournemouth, Dorchester, Weymouth, they're all independent town chambers, and with ours, the Bournemouth one is actually the largest. We all met up last night, actually. All the Dorset chambers come together. It's called the D16, 16 chambers, quite strange enough, good name. And we discuss policy and current affairs across the whole county, so we all keep track of what's happening in business through our regular meetings. But with Dorset Chamber, Bournemouth Chamber rather, we've got 810 at the moment business members just in Bournemouth. And the criteria of that is people who actually do business in Bournemouth. So they could be living further away, but they can still join as a member by doing business in Bournemouth. And those businesses range from very small micro businesses, about 5% of micro, sole traders, to 75% of them are SME, small to medium-sized enterprises, and about 20% of them are corporate. So you range from your smallest baker on the high street to JP Morgan, for example. And the university are now members as well, which is quite exciting, and why we're invited here today, which I'm really enjoying. We're an organisation that wants to support the business community, and we have a listening ear. We hope we have a listening ear. We do lots of things and lots of new media and communication routes to ensure that we actually listen to our business members to identify what their need is and how we can develop and support them going forward. Those 810 members have access to communication routes to other chamber members through e-shots, online facilities, Twitter, LinkedIn groups. So we like to keep our communication routes there. So all key current issues, anything from finding a dead sheep down a drain in Charminster to parking, or to some issues with the Costa car parking in the main centre of the town, are all dealt with. We have a centre, what we call a hub and spoke model in reality. We have the town centre, and then we have our spokes, which is the hub, and then we have our spokes, which we call the trading districts. And each of the trading districts comes under the hub of the Chamber of Commerce, like Southbourne, Charminster, Winton, and such like. We've got 11 trading districts working out there, each with their own trading group set up. And that they were actually initially set up with funding from Bournemouth Chamber to help them grow a website, a map to showcase the businesses in those areas, and to communicate. It's all about communication and marketing. And we got that funding, Bournemouth Chamber got that funding to carry out those projects and help build those chambers, those trading groups rather, some of which are over 100 members strong now. That came through the council. That came through funding from the Bournemouth Council through their recession funding. They put £1 million worth of recession funding aside for growth projects so we could support our businesses during these last few years. So we've been able to do some really exciting projects with that funding, as well as growing the trade groups. We've led, over the last 6 months, we've led seminars on superfast broadband that's come to the area, and given information on how people can actually use superfast broadband and different media, Facebook and such like, how it can be used in business, how to grow business. But as well as our trading areas and our central activity, we have a lot of members now that have specialisms that now come together to help grow community as well. For example, you might have heard of the Green Knowledge Network. We've got a huge amount of businesses now come together because they've got green ethics and they can help people improve the cost of their lighting, the efficiency of their biofuel, the whole magnets on the radiators or whatever they do with them. I'm not quite sure, not technical I'm afraid, but they do a lot of good stuff in the green world. And they collectively, the members that collectively come together, and they're all volunteers working together, and there's no issue of fight against each other basically. These are businesses that are in competition with each other, but they like to collectively work together for the greater need of exposing the issues and how they can support each other. And that's where the communication comes in. We have a recruitment network. We have 32 charities within the Chamber as well that all collectively work together. And again, it's very rare that charities work together collectively for the common good. So this is our communication route. And all people come together through networking and through events and such like to help make decisions and help make business grow in Bournemouth. So that's the actual setup. We've been going since 1916. We were set up by Beals, and I have to wear this lovely thing I thought I'd show you. This is a chain of office of the Chamber of Commerce, and that's what I have to wear when I'm out and about. So it's 1916 that was actually put into place and gifted by Beals in the High Street. So we've got relationships with some of the oldest businesses in town for a long, long time, and it's exciting and proud to be part of such an organisation that we've got actually in town. We're celebrating our 100 years next year, so watch out for the bangs and the fireworks basically. But I thought I'd do a few words as well on the actual reason we're here, as well as just explaining to you what the Chamber is. So if you bear with me, I'm just going to read them out. Okay. I looked at, when Alison sent through the information, I looked at the disengagement from politics. Disillusioned, disenchanted and disengaged from politics is a bit of a theme to do some words on. And I read what was in the Electoral Commission of 2004 to start with, which is the most important factor in improving participation in persuading voters that the election and the political process more generally is relevant to them and that their vote matters. That is the responsibility of politicians of all parties and all levels of governments and arguably the media. So I thought it was an interesting way to actually start it on. Then I was just going to do a few words and let you know that Bournemouth Chamber of Trade and Commerce, very often known as BCTC, is a non-political membership. But there is always a need to be up to date with politics, current affairs, and what is going on around us. I guess we deal more in informal politics than formal in our activity and processes. Our relationship as a Chamber of Commerce with Bournemouth Council is fairly unique, as not many other chambers have a constitutional setup like we have. We meet with the council every month in a historical meeting, get it right, called the Local Government's Affairs Meeting, the LGA we call it. Attendees include representatives such as the council leader, council department leaders, trade group leaders, and town centre to the outer areas of Charminster and Southbourne, etc. We also have councillors from different parties attending, plus representatives from transport and funeral directors, to name just a few. The whole elements of society come together for this meeting in Bournemouth. This enables us to discuss current business affairs and what is going on in tourism, plus what the council plans are in relation to the town and its infrastructure going forward. Again, this is informal politics in action. Without the right players being voted in, we would not have the variety of views needed to enable sufficient information to be gathered, digested, and voted upon. To us, it matters not who is voted in at the next election. We will ensure that communication is open to enable us to work closer and to gain knowledge and support our business members. So to us, it doesn't matter who is voted in. It's the actual joy of being able to work closely with them to guide them so they'll listen to our views as a business community going forward. This is why I believe turnout in elections is important. I don't understand the arguments of those who say that turnout is not important, that we should not worry if people are indifferent about who wins elections or who are just not interested. Turnouts concern me because a reasonable turnout is needed to give a fair democratic process to our governing body, and because low turnout is an indicator of a much wider problem, the disengagement of many people from formal politics. If electors do not turn up, this is more likely that they're being, as they say, turned off. At a recent Parliament Week debate in the Cabinet Chamber of the Bournemouth Town Hall, where MP Conor Burns and Annette Brooks sat on the panel, plus local Conservative councillor Jane Kelly and myself, it was identified that more needs to be done to encourage an understanding of the voting process with our young people in schools and in colleges. Maybe even voting stations within the schools would help us and enable them to focus on why the opportunity to vote is an important one. Maybe this process is needed to be changed to make it easier to vote. There's types of processes, electronic, online, up-to-date, cutting-edge technology in use maybe. If it can still be judged to be confidential and fair, different processes can be thought of. Or voting at the weekend even. If we don't encourage the need for greater understanding of the need to vote within our young people, then this will have a huge knock-on effect in the future. Is it apathy, laziness, or lack of understanding of the differences between the political parties that causes people not to go out, walk round the corner and vote? Do they care about who runs the country and what decisions are made and by whom? They surely shout loud enough when the business rates are high or their taxes are increased. If they don't care, then why is this? Maybe our new world communication infrastructure could be to blame. At one time, the evening news covered relevant current affairs information, and nearly every household had the 6 o'clock news on, with the whole family sitting round to listen and discuss afterwards maybe. Let's go back to the culture that we used to have when I was a child, going back a few years. Now most of us see news updates on the web if we make an effort to view the pages. We can still read the newspaper and turn to news and political channels if desired, but a lesser amount of people do this now, I believe. Certainly, many young people have no regular updates or access to current affairs to be able to understand the debates and differences between the different political parties. How do they become aware of the reasons for the need to vote? It has to impact on their world, and difficult party political groups need to ensure their message goes out to those young people in clear and understandable ways. And in media they understand. Maybe an app, a YouTube video, digital marketing images and processes. We need to talk to them and explain information to them by using modern techniques that they use all the time. Those may well be in use right now, but are young people being guided to them by teachers or parents? More focus on this area needs to be put into place in schools to start the ball rolling for future generations. The more interesting and valid the information is, the more the incentive to voting will grow. Either that, or we give them an incentive to vote. Vote and get a free lollipop, maybe. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, So next I'm going to ask Dom O'Dwyer from People and Planet to add your bit into the debate, please.
Thanks. I feel like standing up just so I can see everyone. Is that going to be annoying for the cameras? No. Hey, so yeah, I guess I'm not particularly bothered by people not voting. I think it's the weakest form of political action that people can take, and I also think that the political, what we see as the political arena, or politics with a capital P, is the most unexciting and uninteresting and useless form of politics that we have. And I think that we need to start the conversation by actually saying what needs changing in the world, what do we want the world to look like, and then how do we get there. And I don't really see voting as a very important step in that question of how do we actually get from here to where we want to be, how do we address the problems that we see in the world that are the biggest problems. I think it's not to say that there's no place for it. It can make a big difference which political party is in power. It's just to say that it's not, we can't see it as a politically powerful form of action that's actually going to address the problems. And I think the extremely low voter turnouts that we've seen, that we're talking about here today, are really a symptom of the fact that most people don't really feel any connection to the political system. They don't feel like it represents them. They don't feel like the people in Parliament speak for them. They certainly don't speak with the same accents, or look the same, or go to the same schools as us. So it's completely understandable that people have the kind of level of engagement that they have with our political system as it stands. And I think that there are actually sort of systematic barriers to entering the political system and being part of that, similar to when Jonathan was talking about someone he knew not being able to get into a public area. I think the same Parliament works in exactly the same way. If you don't speak the right way, if you don't go to the right school, if you're not an able person, then there are all these barriers to you actually getting in power through that system. And I think history's shown us that when we've made great changes in society, they haven't come through people rocking up and ticking a box on a bit of paper. They've come from people actually getting together, organising in groups amongst themselves, getting amongst like-minded people, or people experiencing similar problems, and also really crucially reaching out to other groups of people who are experiencing similar marginalisation and saying, we're being oppressed by this group of people, you guys are being oppressed by this group of people, let's get together and try and challenge that and build something better. And I think that that's a really exciting prospect to look at today, to look at all the different groups that are challenging. Jonathan and I chatted briefly about a group, Disabled People Against the Cuts. We've got UK Uncut here. We've got lots of sort of climate action groups that are fighting against refugee rights, groups that are fighting against racism, groups that are fighting for fairer labour conditions here in the UK and all around the world, people fighting against 0-hour contracts, people fighting for a basic living wage for workers. All these different groups that are struggling for this stuff, reaching out and working together to challenge what is effectively the same problem, which is this system that privileges certain people who speak a certain way, go to a certain kind of school, and enjoy a lot of privileges from the current society, recognising that there's actually a common problem that is kind of the root of a lot of these things that we're talking about. So I thought I'd give just a few examples of kind of exciting stuff that I think is happening now, which is showing what real political action looks like beyond voting, I guess. And also to talk, I'm from People and Planet, so to talk a little bit about what we're doing and maybe how we fit in a really small way into these ideas. So firstly, these past couple of weeks have been really exciting to see, particularly at universities, to see students standing up and saying our universities are becoming increasingly inaccessible for the majority of the population. We've seen fee increases triple. We're now seeing the government proposing to actually privatise student loans, which means that they could hike up interest rates and make going to university way more expensive. So we've seen students in Birmingham, Sussex, Edinburgh, and a number of different places starting to actually occupy their universities, occupy symbolic places in their universities and refuse to leave until these demands are spoken about by the university and these things are kind of talked about. And we've also seen them supporting staff at their universities who are working on 0-hour contracts or who aren't being paid a living wage to actually support those struggles there and start to fight for fairer working conditions and fairer pay. And in terms of some of the stuff that People and Planet have been doing along with a number of other organisations, we've been working in solidarity with people in places like Bangladesh who make garments that universities buy to try and support their struggles for fairer pay and fairer working conditions. Because I think when we talk about this sort of so-called glorious era after the Second World War, what we actually had was an incredibly powerful international labour movement, and we also had countries which had revolutions where the people in power had been kicked out of control through really blatantly unfair conditions that people had fought against. So I think there was a real threat that people in power were dealing with when they made those changes and instituted the welfare state. There was a threat of revolution there that drove those changes. It wasn't necessarily people just going and ticking a box. And so I think, so now part of what we're doing is using universities to support workers in those countries by implementing a worker-led transparency sort of monitoring body in the supply chain that universities can affiliate to, and then we can find out what's happening, we can find out when workers get being treated unfairly, and then put pressure on our universities to cut contracts with suppliers. So earlier in the year, Adidas, we found out about Adidas in Indonesia refusing to pay redundancy pay for thousands of workers in an Indonesian factory. And there was a long campaign putting pressure on Adidas to pay up the money that they owed. And after a really long campaign, the day before a bunch of people who were working in this factory in Indonesia were going to fly over, they caved in and they agreed to pay that money. So it's a really concrete way of supporting places in places like Indonesia and Bangladesh and also Latin America and China to organise and to fight for fairer conditions and to recognise that it actually is an international struggle. The way that the market works now, the way that things get produced, we can't ignore the fact that we live on this round sphere rather than this little island. So I think that's a really important thing to add as well. And finally, we're obviously, one of the biggest failures for me that we can see in our political system is just what we're doing environmentally as well, the kind of just the attitude that says just push through and continue on with the status quo at all costs, even when there's so much information building up about how catastrophic a situation we're actually getting ourselves into and how completely incapable our so-called political leaders are of actually dealing with this crisis. The recent Warsaw Climate Conference, I'd completely given up. I didn't even follow it because I knew exactly what was going to happen before it started. And I think for a number of years, a lot of us have felt that way. And the solution to that is to actually get organised ourselves and probably to do the kind of stuff that Kim is going to talk about next, and to think about how we can actually take politically powerful actions, how we can organise ourselves to fight for these changes that we really need to see, and how we can look beyond the really limited political structure in which we live in now, and to recognise fundamentally that our lives are political. Everything we do is political. All the choices we make are political. The question is, what kind of politics are we supporting, and what kind of politics are we challenging, and what alternatives are we building? Thanks.
Okay, so our last speaker today then is Kim Elkin from Bournemouth Uncut.
Hi. I wanted to come here and tell you a personal story of how I got involved. Because people say, how do you end up doing direct action? Well, here's what happened. I voted Lib Dem. I think that was, and we all know how that panned out. I was signing online petitions. And it was a combination, to be honest. The banks screwed me, the government screwed me, and I lost my job. So I sat at home being angry and thought, what can I do about this? Austerity is the problem. So then I saw on March the 26th, 2011, there was the March for the Alternative. And I saw UK Uncut and the mass arrests at Fortnum and Mason. And the first thing I thought was, why? Well, I went and looked on their website, and I saw their message that we could pay for austerity 3 times over if we just clamped down on tax avoidance. And tax avoidance by multinationals, by all the high street chains. This isn't a few people, this is an awful lot of money and a lot going on. So I thought, I see why they got arrested. They don't want this getting out. So immediately I thought, right, I'll join UK Uncut. So I went and gave out some leaflets in Southampton, and then I went and occupied a Tesco in Oxford. And I thought, this is the way to go. I'm still believing in the political system a bit at this point, but that was short-lived. I had been writing to my MP, Robert Sims, and he was not replying to my letters. He wouldn't return my calls. So I arranged a 38-degree petition hand-in about the NHS, so did that. That was on the Friday, and he cancelled on us at the very last minute. And when we asked why, I was told he'd been called to Parliament urgently. Well, that was a big porky, wasn't it? Because it was recess. Parliament was shut. So we embarrassed him in the press, and finally he agreed to talk to me. So I went to see him, and I'll be honest, that is where all my hope disappeared. He didn't care. We were the problem. The NHS was safe in Tory hands. And, as long as we all stop meddling, it'll work out really nicely. So I left there, and I just thought, what's the point? I really, at that point, gave up on the political system. So I organised a direct action with Bournemouth Uncut, and we got 13 people. And we directed our actions at the banks, which is where pretty much a lot of the anger still is for people. And I left there and I felt really empowered. I felt alive. I felt like, whereas the political system is not representing me, I can affect change by going out and making a noise. And we may shut down shops for a couple of hours and cost a tax avoider a bit of money. But what it's really about is going out and connecting with everyday people on the street and talking to them and talking about the injustice. Because until we all come together and we hammer them with our point of view, they're never going to represent us. And, basically, if politics changed anything, I fear it'd be illegal. So what is direct action? Anyone know? Any ideas?
Not you guys at the front.
Well, there's occupations, like we've heard at universities. There's strikes, sit-ins, blockades, banner drops, leafleting, hacktivism, marching, demos. We served our local Tory councillors with some eviction notices and crime scened up their houses. It didn't go down very well, but we had a lovely time, didn't we? Yes. So direct action is essentially a lone person or a group of people that come together about some injustice, some existing problem. And as UK Uncut do, we go out and we offer a solution, an alternative. So why direct action over politics? Well, I started this 2 years ago. I started, signing petitions, and 2 years later I'm an anarchist. I have given up with the political system completely as it is. I very much stand behind the words of Russell Brand. I think we need a revolution in politics. I think our leaders need to be democratically accountable. The people need to take back this version of democracy that doesn't work for any of us. So that's why I got involved, and that's why I keep doing what I do, to try and alter people's perceptions, make them think and make them question the system we have, and is it really necessary? So that's why I do what I do. Should we do the yeah. Does anybody fancy a little bit of direct action? Well, not exactly direct action. We have some arm tubes. This is what we use in the direct action to block a road, create a space that's occupied. And if there's 3 or 5 willing volunteers, we can show you how it works.
I think I can see 3 at the back.
Picked on. Come on, guys.
President, pose the president.
Go on, guys.
And this is easily done. This
Climb
is-
over. Oh, yeah. That's brilliant.
So this is a cheap and easy example of how you can block a road. You have the inside of the carpet tube taped up, so it's just a bit water resistant. And then you literally chain yourselves to each other. You stick your arm down the tube, another person, and you lock on together. And by doing this, you can create you can just block a road with about 5 people. It's very effective. You can then, with chains, lock on to other things. You can use bike D-locks. You can, a lovely little trick for revolving doors is sit up a ladder with a D-lock round your neck and they can't do anything. So shutting things down and causing problems is what we try to do. And it does upset people, and people say, well, don't you worry about how you're going to be perceived. And quite frankly, no, I'm over it. I really am. Let's cause a bit of disruption. Let's slow the machine down a bit. So yes, if you see a bunch of people locked together in the middle of the road, it could well be us. I will go and do right. Okay, we do that.
Just hold on to that in that hand.
I'll give you all one of these. And just stick it round your wrist. And that goes through the end bit there. And then that goes in. What you're going to do, essentially, is we're going to put our arms together inside the tube. And we are going to lock the D-locks together. And that means we're essentially joined. Okay? Probably just do, 3. I'll see the other side. But this can fought with these for hours.
So what kind of places have you done this? What places have you?
We've done some of the biggest actions. We've done with disabled people against the cuts, who do a lot of locking on with arm tubes and things like that.
These are ready for something else. We haven't actually used these yet, but they will be coming in useful at some point.
But yeah, these would be used for blocking roads mostly, or shop doors.
Shop doors, yes.
Right, so now if you guys step apart.
We're going to have to make a triangle. We'll probably need this.
And you put your arm inside down. What you're going to do is hold on to this and clip the 2 together inside.
Fingers crossed, these are the right length.
They are.
And you can reach each other.
So we're going to hacksaw. Have you ever seen the cube? It's like one of those games. Hello.
It's easier said than done.
My cub's here. I can feel your fingers, but that's not about it.
We're going to put your arm up there.
Okay, I won't open my tip. Find my tip.
Don't worry about it.
If you say so.
It is.
Just pretend.
It is easier said than done.
Pretend. I clipped you.
Yeah. And then your arm goes in there.
Or clipping you now as well.
There you go.
I'll clip the thing.
Now, you can imagine.
I'll do it.
You can add to this, and you can create quite a big structure.
Yeah.
But it's also movable to the police, because they want to cut through, but they don't know where your arm is, where it begins, where it ends, if there's a big gap. They've got to be very careful of you. So you can literally slow them down for 3-4 hours with something like this. which can be quite effective at causing chaos. Brilliant.
Who's going to leave It's be a great hello.
And when you do this, you have a support group, you have people to give them water, you have people to give them medication, food, whatever's required. Well, this is it. You have to be able to lock off if you want to.
You're going to finish the triangle?
Are we? I don't think there's the room to finish the triangle.
No, there's not.
Now
There's
nobody,
not. But you get the idea.
nobody can leave now.
No, you all start. Lovely. Thank you very much.